Introduction to Drawing for Designers. Today is February 13th, 2020, San Francisco State University. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll draw the clothespin. We'll forget about the spring, because that adds another layer of complexity. So we'll draw the clothespin in front view, in top view, and in side view. And this is the diagram, and I'll give you some dimensions where to place things, okay? And because this clothespin is not like, a Cadillac of clothespins, it's sort of more like a Honda of clothespins. The dimensions are not always like perfect or even. So what I did in my drawing, I simplified a few things, okay? And I'll give you those dimensions. And as we do it together, I'll just tell you, okay? So that you could measure, but you can also just follow the drawing. And I'll be shifting my paper because I can't fit the whole paper, it'll be too far. So again, it's based on a rectangle. However, it's more like a trapezoid because at the top is narrower. And I have the dimensions. I'll give you this later, which is a diagram of how to find out how the inner part kind of converges at the tip here, etc. And the trick is that we're going to draw it 1.5 times the original, okay? So whatever is the real dimension, and we're going to use millimeter because it's a lot easier to add 50% millimeters. So if I have 10 millimeters, well, if I have 12 millimeters, I can just say, 12 plus 6 is 18. You could do that with inches too, but if you have a dimension that's a little bit more strange, it's easier to use millimeters. Yeah, so this is 1.5 times, okay? And yeah, we will put dimensions. In my sketch here, I put in parentheses the drawn dimensions, but the real dimensions normally in a drawing are the ones that correspond to the real object. So the real object is, let's say it's 126 millimeters. So 126 millimeters, if you look at your ruler, is here. By the way, 10 millimeters equal 1 centimeters. So 1 centimeter, there's 10 millimeters inside. So 126 is about 5 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah. And that would be the drawn dimension. However, the real thing is 84 millimeters. And that's about this long, okay? So anyway, it might be a little confusing at the beginning, but I'll just repeat everything. They're written here. This is in iLearn, so it shouldn't be. It's just a matter of paying attention to the steps. So let's see, and then the other views besides the front and the right side view, or left, in this case they're the same. We'll do a top view, which would be this part, and then we'll do a little section. So we'll indicate that we're going to cut this object right there, and then we indicate with these little arrows that we're going to be looking down onto it, and that's what we see, okay? It's actually slightly off because after I cut it, see right now this part is not touching, but as I cut it, of course the spring pushes it. So actually there is a tiny gap if this wasn't pushing in, if the spring had been taken off. And in this drawing, which is again an orthographic drawing of an object, what you do is you draw the main view and then the other views are derived. So you would just project lines from, in this case, the front view to get the side view, and then you just give it its dimension. And the third view would be constructed from a combination of projecting these lines up and projecting these lines sideways using a compass here of the 45. So in short, what you want to do is do, again, as little as possible measurement and just, move your lines across to get these other views. Other details are going to be how we're going to draw. These are too small to draw with the compass. I mean, you could, but it's a little tricky. So we will draw these with templates that I have, and I already have them marked to the right dimension. So let me see if I can find them. There we go. And this is actually in inches, so I had to play around to find exactly the right one. But let's see. I should mark them here. I'll be doing a lot of markings on this drawing, but you don't have to. Maybe you can do them on the side on another piece of paper for yourself, so the drawing doesn't get all messy like this one, for example. So on my template, I'll have circle number 1, circle number 2, and circle number 3, and these are the circles here. Okay, so we'll have a reference. So the biggest, middle, and then, smallest and middle. But we're not there yet. So the other things are that, as a convention, I did a double line to show the ground line. It's just a technique we did when I went to school. And then we're going to add some dimensions, which are lines with dimensions, with numbers, showing, from where to where, how big things are, okay? And these are little arrows in a particular shape to indicate that. And then we're going to indicate the radiuses of the circles. And yeah, that's it. So, okay. So what we'll do, we can start our drawing, we can start to block out these shapes in the drawing. And for that, let me just double check. Make sure that, so I left 1/2 inch from the title block and 1 inch from there, 6 inches. I'll put up a little sketch. Just to find it here. Maybe I can use this one. So let's just get a few dimensions. So this will be 1/2 inch from the title block. I had one that's simplified, but now I lost it. Okay. So 1 inch. Yeah, 1 inch. So the first line you would do is a line at the bottom next to the title block. So that would be 1/2 inch plus 1/2 inch, 1 3/4 from the edge of the paper if you want to do the title block later. Right? From paper. And then we're going to put 1 inch in these spaces here, 1 inch here. We're going to make the cross. And then these blocks, And as soon as I write this down, I'm going to draw it myself. So they will be, so the pin is 16 millimeters by 84. So that rectangle will be 24 by 126 millimeters. That's just how it happens if you do time and a half. So here I'm going to write 24, and we get this sort of blocked out. And here I'm going to write 126. Yeah. And the width of the is 10 millimeters, so there will be 15 millimeters, and again 126. So these are the main sort of blocks that we need to establish, and this could be light lines because okay, can you all see it? So we have the paper. Half inch from the paper is the title block, which is 3/4 inches. And then we're going to do another line, half inch on top of that. Find your center to put this line, right, in the middle of your drawing. I had to cut off my borders because I had to scan it last night and I couldn't fit it in my scanner. And of course, these days you would do a drawing like this on the computer, but on the computer it's a little hard to see all these steps, right? I think it's good to have a little training in how things are set up and in the process, which again, the computer kind of, hides that completely. So. Yeah, let me just come around and see if you are, if you have any issues with figuring this out. Okay, so I'm going to now draw it myself on a piece of paper. And again, I'm going to have to move the paper sort of on and off. Let me see where we are here. I'm just going to try to position it so that I don't have to move it too many times. Okay, that's good. All right. So yeah, so far you want to do lines that are thin, right? Because these are really just construction lines. Okay, so so I should say a couple of things about actually scaling, and because of inches and feet and yards and miles, and nothing fits inside the other in any sort of rational way, architects and engineers have come up with these crutches, really, which is an architect scale or an engineer scale. And so in these things, it's sort of pre-drawn for you. If you're using, for example, a 3/4 scale, and you measure something, these would be like 2 inches at 3/4 scale. So these would be like 75%. So if you took 2 inches, it's really smaller than 2 inches. And then, so it's already like pre-drawing from you what 2 inches would be at that particular scale. And typically it's lower scales, but sometimes it's higher scales like we're doing now. So there is a scale that's called 1.5, which would be like our scale, right? So this, it says here 1 and 2. It's a little confusing because it doubles up with another scale on the other side. So 2 inches, let's see, where are we? So 1.5, yeah. See, I'm confused myself. It's so much easier to use regular divisions with millimeters, but let me see. Let me figure this out. 1, 4 inches, 1.5 scale. Right, so it's bigger. Right. So this is 1.5 scale. So this would be 2 inches in real life, but in my drawing, I would draw this 2 inches to be this big, which is really 3 inches. So there's enough to be confused right there, just even that simple explanation. But in Europe, what you do is you just say, 1 to 10, 1 to 20, 1 to 50, and maps. Actually, if you notice, maps are typically written like that. 1 to 20,000 means something on the map that's this big. In real life, it's going to be 25,000 bigger or whatever. So because millimeters are decimal, it's easier to just do time and a half, because it's easier to multiply time and a half, let's say 34 millimeters, than say 1 and 5/8, whatever that is, right? So if you ask me how much is this time and a half, oh my gosh, right? It's like 1.5, 1 and 5/8, it's ½ inch. So it would be 1.5 inch, now 5/8 times, anyway, you can see it. It's nuts. So let's just use millimeter, which is what they use in industrial design most of the time anyway, like Apple uses, mostly because they manufacture in China. But so in our drawing, the pin, again, it's, if you measure it using millimeters, we said we measured, and it's 84. Okay? 84 millimeters. So you just simply time that time and a half. And I'm already telling you what it is. I'm just writing it here. So if you multiply that time and a half, or 50% more, you get 126, because it's 84 plus 42, right? Yeah. So 50% more is 42 more. So you get 126, and so forth and so on. So whenever we take a dimension, we'll multiply time and a half, but the main thing really is that we get the blocks first established, okay? So, so the 2 blocks are, again, let's see if I can write them here. And these are drawn dimensions, okay? 126, and this is 24. Yeah? And this is ½ inch there. And this is 1 inch. Okay, so I have to catch up now. I have to draw it myself. So basically, we're just drawing the enclosing boxes, okay? Let me see. Okay, so ½ inch from the bottom is the border, then 3/4 of an inch, and then another ½ inch. Okay. I'm not going to draw my title block now because I don't have time. So you guys are a little ahead. I guess I'm going to go ahead and draw that line fairly dark because it's my ground line at the bottom. You would be going all the way, right? Since you have all your construction. Then we have the center line. So again, it's 9 inches from edge to edge, so 4.5. And now, since I don't have your straight edge, I can do it 2 ways. Again, I can trust the edges of the paper. Another thing I could do is I could use my triangle to get a perfect vertical of my horizontal by actually sliding my triangle this way. So if I take a reading down here, you don't need to do this now, obviously, because you have your parallel edge. But if you didn't, this would be one way to get a perfect vertical by just sliding the triangle like that. And this is nice now because now I can really trust this, right? I know this is perfect because I drew it this way. And now I'm just going to make it a little darker. So I use it as a reference point for my future lines. Also, let me just quickly say something about, again, these three planes, if you can look up for a moment. So remember, we talked about, we look at the object straight on, and for every view, we just project that onto another plane, which is really a glass box. And in this case, we're looking in from the outside. And so what we're doing is this. Okay, so we have the object kind of, well, the object could be, standing like that, and really, that's really the way it is, but I can't show it to you if I do that. So if the object is here, that's the projection of the, now it's a little, sorry, I wish this was transparent. Next time I'll do it with a piece of acetate, but what we're doing is really, it's really this. So the object is there. We're looking in, and we have this enclosure, and what we see on that glass is those views, assuming that if we project the lines perpendicular, we don't get any perspective, so we don't see any bit of the other sides, okay? So if I go around that box to the right side, I see that, and if I go on top, I see that. And then for the practical purposes of our drawing, since this is not very practical, right, to carry around the box for a picture. So what we do is we flatten by, and this is the connecting, projecting line between these views, which typically we do with a compass, and that becomes our drawing, okay? It's pretty much that. It's the fold out. Imagine a box of cereal, with a, I don't know, a toy clothespin inside as a present. And then you open it up and you see it's there, and you open it up and you have this picture. And that was to say that, that this line is the hinge of your box, right? So this line that we draw between the two views is basically this folded part. And also here, this other folded part around here. And that's why, if you can, you should put the object at the same distances from this cross, okay? So that means once we draw this box, then we just do another hinge here and another hinge here, so that everything is like rotating around this center, okay?
So what's the length of the middle line?
This middle line?
Yeah, until it hits the horizontal line? Yeah.
How long is it, you mean?
Yeah, just from the like...
Well, this is just going all the way across almost, right? I mean, I stopped it there, but...
No, I'm saying like where it stops at the horizontal. Yeah, what's the length from that point?
Yeah, so once you draw this box, then just add 1 inch. Okay. Yeah, only because we have already established that we have an inch here, right? So in a way, we could have done it the other way, like started there and dropped this down and then pushed that up, but we didn't. So so this would be in the little sketch here. This would be also 1 inch. Yep. Yeah, no, I didn't draw it very well. I mean, it doesn't really matter that much, but if we wanted to be, strict about how the construction was, yes, this would be how it would be done, because what happened here is that I transfer these lines to get the top view by using my 45, okay? So first I project these lines up, and then where they hit that plane, I project them with that rotation. So I do that by using the 45, which gets me exactly the same height. But in the old school, old-fashioned way, really the way you would do it is you would take the compass and you would bring this up like this, and that's why this is the same as this. Okay, like imagine that you have a circle here, with everything is in the same relationship. It's faster to do it with the triangle. So let me quickly draw my own box, and then all right, so millimeters, okay, inches. Maybe what I'll do, I could put this down actually and draw on top so that I can leave it up for you to look at. Let's just do it. Okay, so it's 24 millimeters wide, which again in real life, 24. In real life it's 16 millimeters. And then on the side here it's 10 millimeters, which becomes 15 millimeters. So once again, millimeters are the little guys inside the centimeters. Okay, so that's 1 centimeter, which includes 10 millimeters. That's 5 millimeters, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. Oops. And again, and the height is 126. So I draw that. And since I'm here, I'm going to draw also my extra inch. And my extra inch. And once again, I'm going to draw my lines fairly dark, even though you should not, because until you know that those are the lines you're going to need. So again, to use the triangle, even if you're using your parallel edge, just make it slide, and then when you're ready to draw the line, you want to lock it with your fingers, right, with your other hand, so that when you draw your line, it doesn't move around. Okay, so again, I'm doing everything fairly dark so you can see it, but you keep yours light, yes? For these lines I'm drawing now, of course, use your straight edge, right? No need to measure or to do anything. I'm just adding the lines I'm going to need later. Oh, that's right. This should go to the base here. Hold on a second. Okay, I was getting confused here. I didn't finish my box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this double line that kind of is a little conventional thing that shows that this is the ground. And the way it's drawn, it's like two lines, and the object is sitting on the first line, but then there's like a thicker line underneath it. It's just, again, just a conventional way to signify that that's the ground. So you can do a thick line just by going over, by moving your straight edge a couple of times up and down to get, or even playing with your pencil, moving it, angling it a little bit better. There we go. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, actually, I'm just going to lift this up, and I want you to start drawing like some basic divisions. And you can just measure it. Now, sometimes having exact dimensions that like actually complete the picture can be tricky, because sometimes you measure and then all of a sudden the total doesn't come to like the right amount. And that's why some people say, oh, you should leave one dimension out. But in this case, I figured it all out. It's all correct. So let me show you. If you look up for a moment, let me show you what the sort of basic dimensions are. So important dimensions are where the circles are. And because there was no room there, or it was a little tight, I put it on this side. So that's 16 millimeters in real life and 24 down. And then the other two are 33 down plus 11 more down. Again, these are rounded off because if you measure exactly, it might be slightly off. And again, the measurements in parentheses are like what you need to mark off with your tools because those are bigger, those 1.5 times, okay? And believe me, you can actually do 0.5 millimeters because you can see 0.5 millimeters. So the first one, in order for it to come all correct, is going to be 49.5 millimeters. So 49.5 millimeters is from 0 to 4 centimeters, and then 49 millimeters, and then somewhere in the middle there, okay? So it's almost 50 millimeters, almost 5 centimeters, okay? You can, and once we get those crosses, we'll know then later we can do those templates, those circles, but we'll leave the circles at the end, okay? Let's see, maybe, how about I just draw it on the side here? Where's my other pencil? Yeah, since we have room, I'll just put it here. So this is 49.5, 16, oops, 16.5, and this is 60. And then here, it's 16. Okay, so I'm gonna do that now. I'm gonna mark 49.5. Maybe because then it's a little tricky I'm gonna mark 60 from the bottom. And the remaining should be 16.5, which it is. And then 16 from the side here. Is that right? Sorry. That's wrong. Yeah, I see. It's easy to get confused. So 16 is the real dimension, millimeters, but in our drawing it's going to be 24 millimeters because 16 times and a half. So $24. Okay. And after we do these lines, we're just going to draw the main shape of the pin, okay? Okay? So that's, again, these are these main points, yeah?
What are the points on those? I'm sorry.
So these distances?
Yeah.
Yeah. These are where we're going to place our circles. So they're basically the distance from the top to this first set of circles.
Okay.
And that's here. I guess I could do it here so that it's all. Let me just put it on this side so it's a little easier to see. Yep. Right. Everything's time and a half, but I'm giving you the actual dimensions. Yes. Yeah. And now I think the one thing we can do is just draw the trapezoid, the shape. That's a simple thing we can do. So I'm going to zoom in and again, I rounded off things because So once again, everything that is not in parentheses is like the real thing, right? So for example, 5 millimeters is the distance between the two circles that we're going to draw later. Okay, we'll have to figure out what that is. 8 millimeters is the distance between the two, the two tips here. Okay, it's the distance between, on the inside, between this guy and that guy. And then these little parts, I just labeled 2 millimeters. And I could measure it. Let's see if I'm right. Now it's out of focus, but let me just do a little trick here where I can maybe paint these guys.
Is that sheet online?
Yes, it is. So the two drawings I'm showing, this part is online. I double checked everything last night because but no video yet online. So hopefully if this video works, maybe I'll put it online, but I'm not sure. There's always something that goes wrong with videos. Yeah, so this would be, yeah, you can see it's about 2 millimeters. So the thickness, I'm saying the thickness of those parts is 2 millimeters. Now, it could be a little off, but it's just really too hard because it's so small. So we're going to say it's 2 millimeters, which in your drawing, it means it's 3, right? So we've got 3 millimeters from the edge in the drawing, and 3 millimeters from this edge, and then 3 more millimeters, and then that's the gap. So why don't we go ahead and mark off 3 and 3. So 3 millimeters, 3 millimeters, 3 millimeters, 3 millimeters. And then we're just going to connect the bottom. And I didn't mark it here, but it's the same. Actually, it looks a little bit thicker. No, it's the same. We'll just say that these are also 2 millimeters or 3. So what that means is we're gonna have these cuts. And I should really, so you don't get confused, I should still keep these in parentheses because otherwise, and then these are all 3. And these are 3, okay? Yep. So that will give us the basic shape. You have 24 to start with, right? So everything should be fairly even and round, right, in terms of numbers. So we're going to do 3, 3 more, and then from the other side, 3, and while we are at it, we can also say that how far it goes down, how far this piece goes down is 5 millimeters, which again, time and a half is 7.5. So I'm going to mark that off too now. So 7.5. Again, just split, just try to make that mark in between. So now I'm going to draw that distance there, right there. Oh yes, I want to mark my little feet, again, 3 millimeters and 3 millimeters, even though I didn't mark them here. Right there. And now I just start, building it up. So I'm going to connect the first of the two 3 millimeter spaces to the corner. And that's about all I can do for now because the other parts are a little more complicated. Again, leave it light. I'm doing it fairly dark. Yeah, so now I can just also connect that spot, right? So again, it drops down 7.5. Oh, but I need the midpoint. I need to draw my divider, my axis, my center line in my object, because that's going to be really useful. So that's 12 millimeters, right? Because it was 24. And I mark it there, and then I just that, and I happen to have, when I measured, I hit it just right, even though without really measuring. So let's see. So now I can start getting somewhere here, right? I think. Okay, so that's the basic shape, right? It's a little bit trickier now to make the inner parts. So I'm going to stop for a moment and go around and see if you need help, okay? So this is, so this is a picture of the full drawing. So you can see relative to the real object, so it'll fill up pretty much the page. You see it? Yeah. And so the 1 inch is from the center, and then the object is to the two sides. Right now we're just focusing on the lower part. And then once we get ready to do the circles, I'll just pass around the little template, and I'll show you how to use that.
You're not using the exact dimensions?
No, like I said, we're drawing it at 1.5 times. Yeah, just because it fits better in the drawing.
How do you measure that half time? Because I wasn't really understanding the thing.
You have to multiply time and a half. I just tried to make everything kind of even. I mean, it is more or less even in the actual drawing, but so all these spaces at the tip here, they're all even. So they're all 2, 2, 2, right? So it goes in by 2, and then that part is also 2, which means, again, in the drawing, it means 3. So if you did the math, 2, 2, 2 and 2, that's 8, and 8 in between is 16, which is 24, and then 3, 3 is 6, 12, and 12 is 24, yeah. Okay, so let's do one more thing before the break, and now we're gonna draw the inside part, the inside lines. Now I just made some decisions because I just needed to. You know how it's split here? So it doesn't really touch anywhere except at the very, very tip, right? Technically, even though it looks like it's touching all the way here, but it's really just touching at the very tip here. And I actually didn't measure whether this thickness kept being the same, but as a result, the way I did it, it turns out it is more or less. My gap, so the gap in my drawing looks a little bigger than the gap here, but let's just call it good, otherwise I'll explain in a moment how I came up with that larger gap. And I had to sort of just try to figure out again what the geometry was, and I decided that to draw, so this line, okay, is different from that line inside. So there's 2 lines inside, one in the top part and one in the bottom. And I decided that when I looked at the geometry, if I drew a line from the bottom here, let me just zoom in. If I drew a line from this spot, from the inner tip of this little, lip part, to the inner tip of the opposite on the bottom, I would get, more or less a line that matched this part. And so I just did that. I just did 2 crosses, and I have another drawing actually, which I put up so that will explain a little better. So essentially, if we're calling these 2 points A and B and C and D down there, I just connected them into one big cross, okay? You see what I did? So when I did that, then I just picked my, the distance where my circle was as the point where the line changes direction, okay? So the first step I did was just simply connecting A and B, so the 2 tips inside at the top with the 2 tips inside at the bottom, except in a cross, right, in an X. And then where they hit my, my spring circle there, I took that point and I connected that point to the bottom of the pit there, to that little valley, okay? You see it? So I'll lift these up and I'll just come around and see if you can, so once again, if you look at the pin, I'm connecting the inside here, the inside points at the tip with the inside points at the bottom. And I kind of made that up. I mean, it's probably not exactly that, but for the purposes of this drawing, I'm just I'm reversing engineering it, right? So again, do a cross, 2 lines that make a cross or an X from the inner points at the top to the inner points at the bottom. So yeah, so from there, from A to D, and from B to C, and what that X, not what the X actually crosses itself, but where those 2 lines actually cross the spring center line, then I took those 2 points and I connected it to this part in the pin, okay? And that gives us a reasonable, good approximation of what the pin might be. I'll go ahead and write also 3 millimeters down here because, again, in parentheses here, okay? Yeah, let's just review like some basics so that we are all on the same page. So again, put your baseline at 3/4 inch from the title block. Is that what I did? Or an inch? Wait a minute. Half inch, sorry. Half inch. So the space from the title block is half inch, okay? So that you have more room then to do everything else. We put the boxes at 1 inch from this line. Okay, and and then the total dimensions were 126 by 24 for the front view, and 126 by 15 for the right view, for the right side view. Okay, and we're going to do now the top view, and then these were the dimensions to locate eventually the circles, for which I'll have a template, and I'll pass this around. And these were all 3 millimeter spacings at the top for the little parts, the little tip of the pin, 3. So 3 towards the inside to create the smaller dimension, and also 3 here. And we connected the outer tips from the bottom corner to these outer tips here. And for the inside lines, we connected the inner tips, A and B, to the inner tips at the bottom, C and D. But then we only, so that's an X with the center kind of a little bit of the higher than the midpoint, and then where it meets that line where your big spring circle will be, we stopped there and we connected those 2 points to the V there, okay? So that's how we find these other 2 lines. And this drawing is also on iLearn, okay? I put both drawings on iLearn, this drawing and this drawing. So now really we could do the circles right away, or we could do this little well, let's do the circles. The only thing let me just zoom in a little bit. So we're going to locate sorry. So the big circle where the spring is, you actually are going to need the center line, which I realize I don't have on mine yet. Because it's just one plain circle, and it will be centered there. Yeah. And for the smaller circle, even though in our axonometric drawing by hand, we kind of assumed that was just one circle carving out the middle there. Here, as you can see, they're pulled apart a little bit, the two halves of that circle. So when I give you the template, we'll just place it, well, let me just show you. We'll place the center, place the circle, centered on that line. And just to show you how to use this template, and we're going to say that's also, let's see, 1, 2, and 3. I'm sorry, we're going to call this 1 circle, 2 circle, and 3 circle. Right, so because I marked them on my template, I said that's number 1, that's number 2, and that's number 3. So what you do when you draw them is you try to locate the cross points, okay? And so that would be number 3. Okay, so you see, I mean, it doesn't really, it becomes a little more difficult to locate the exact position if you don't align these guys, because now I'm not sure exactly what the center might be. So just try to align it, okay, like that, so that, and these are not perfect because these are inches, so I just found whatever circle matched, my dimension, and you have a little room. Your pencil is going to go inside, so it's not going to match exactly the edge of your template. Try to figure out before you make your mark, where the pencil is going to hit, how much room you need for the tip of your pencil, etc. So let me see if I do 1. Oh, I haven't drawn it here yet. Hold on a second. Let me do that. I'm just getting my shape finished here. I hadn't quite finished. Okay. So again, we're calling the circles. The top one we're calling it number 1. The middle one we're calling it number 2, and the third one we're calling it number 3. Yeah, so I'm just going to do this one first. I'll do all 3, and then I'll pass the template around, right? So that's number 3. So that's this one. Oops, got too far. Yeah. So I just tried to center it again using my crosshairs, right? Basically, that's what they are. I do a circle. Now, after I do a circle, I know that I'm actually just going to need, is that the right one? Yeah. I'm going to lose these parts in the middle, right? So I know I'm just going to need this part. And actually, I still don't have my lines over here, so let me finish those two. So we said that after we did the big X and the lines crossed this point, we were going to connect these points to the, we're going to connect wherever they meet here of the big X to this point right here, and we get the other two, okay? So that creates that other gap. So let me just do that. Yep, okay. And after I do that, now I know exactly what parts I didn't do a good job there. It's not very symmetrical. Yeah, see, I went off to the left there. But anyway, now that I have these two lines, I can finish my circle here by stopping the line where I absolutely need it. And if I had done a better job, it would be a little clearer there, but it's really this part right here. Okay. So, and then these are my new lines, so I'll have to place the other. So in these parts, these are now my centers for these two bits of the circles, okay? See that? So now I look for circle number 2, and I placed right here, circle number 2, and I placed that. Sorry, it looks messy, but I just centered. So basically, I'm also angling it a little bit because my line is a little bit at an angle, right? Oops. Uh-oh. Knocked the camera. And again, I know I'm only going to use it. And then I move to the other side, tilt it a little bit. Okay. Okay, and then the last one is a little bit, we have two circles here. So we said that the distance between the two is 5 millimeters. If I look at the pin, and you can see it's 5 millimeters. And so that's half a centimeter, right? And I determined that that was how the circles were constructed, one on top of one another. So I need to locate these two centers, which I don't have yet, but I can also measure. Okay. So one and two. And I do my little crossings and my little verticals because they will help me again in positioning my template. Sorry about the washing out here with the. Okay. If you notice, somehow things were not looking the same, so I fudged it a little bit to make it all look the same. All right, now I take my template, and that's circle number 1, and I do 2 circles first, kind of light again. So these are my centers. Like that. And then I do the other one, and then I try to picture and see how it looks, right? So if I do it right, these 2 points with with these two circles meet should be exactly on the vertical, right? So that's it. It's not, yeah, it's not great. I shouldn't have done that, right? I moved to the right, but now I'm off here. Anyway, I can now adjust a little bit. This looks pretty good. So I need to, yeah, it's not quite symmetrical because this should be the same. So I will try to adjust it a little bit because it looks too big, my opening, but that's what it is. Why is it so big? See, in this drawing looks much less. Did I put them? Oh, no, okay. All right. Anyway, maybe I'm talking too much here. So let me just darken that. And then I can probably adjust it when I do the, so you always want to do your curves first, because then it's easier to connect the straight lines as opposed to do the straight lines first and now I just connect everything. So this should be pretty good. So again, I go from point to the middle and then from the opposite point because it's easier to get like good connections. I'm going a little bit from the side because I don't want to get my head in front of the camera. But normally you would keep your pencil a little more straight, okay? It's just that. So we have this little skyscraper. That'd be cool if they did a skyscraper in the shape of a clothespin. Okay, that's good. And now I'm going to finish this part right here. Yeah. So again, start from one end and then kind of fade out in the middle and then start from the other end because it's going to be easier. Okay, so now the only thing we're going to need is the little notches here, this part, right? Okay, and even though these parts are actually cut out perpendicular to that line, which is at an angle, you know, they're kind of coming in a little bit sideways like this, right? But for our purposes, because they're so small, we're going to make them straight. We're just going to make horizontal lines. Yeah. So the dimensions for those are on the right side of the drawing. So it's 36 down, and then it's 3. And then it's 4.5. And here it's it's 5 and 1, which means 7.5 and 1.5. Yeah. So we could just measure that on the side here. So I measure 36. All right, I'll just go ahead and finish this, and then I'll come around and help you out. Again, 3 becomes 4.5, so I move it slightly. And then down here I have 1.5, 5, 1.5, 5, 1.5. Sorry, 5, 1.5. So 5, 1.5. Then I have to move 5, 1.5. So anyway, I measure them here, but now I can bring them across as well, right? So this would be double duty with these lines. Again, don't forget, don't use 2 triangles like I'm using to do all your horizontals because you already have your gadget, right? You already have this thing that goes up and down. You don't need to do what I'm doing. So light lines, just like that, you know, just to see what what you need to then highlight further later. I missed there, a little too thin. I'll have to keep track. I did a double line there that I didn't need. And then here, I didn't put any dimensions, but it looks like 1.5 millimeters there and maybe 1 millimeter there. So let me just see. Yeah. Okay. So in other words, if I measure this, how big it is, it's a fuzzy dimension. It's like 1.5, something in between. So I just for the drawing, I made it, I think, a little smaller. And I called it 1.5 at drawing, at the drawing scale. So that means in reality it would have to be 1 millimeter. So just make it 1.5 there and 1 millimeter there. Okay, so that would be 0.5 and 1. That means how deep they are, right? Whereas the height is actually given here, right? So where am I here? So I just measure 1.5. 1.5, 1 millimeter, and 1 millimeter. Okay. Okay. There is one little trick now, and that is that this vertical line is not the line that matches that cutout, right? The line that matches that cutout is this line, which, remember, it's a little bit skewed. So what I need to do here, actually, can you look up for a moment? This is kind of important. It's just a little detail. So the lines I need to do now to finish these off, these and these. I mean, again, they're so tiny you could get away by not doing this, but they might look a little funny, especially this one because it's bigger. So the line that I need is not this vertical, right, which is all my verticals, but it's the line of the pin. So it's this parallel line, and then I need to move across this way, which means I need to take a reading already at the right angle, okay? So I'm placing my triangle smack against the pin, and then I move in, and then I do the opposite on the other side, right? It's like that, and then once I set it, then I move across in. So it's a little angle, it's a small angle, but it's there, right? In other words, that's the angle, right? This would be the straight, but I have a certain angle now. Sorry, let me do it again. Yeah, now it's correct. So that's it. And then I'm using that also to finish off the sides of the pin. Yeah, these things get a little tight now, but don't get too frustrated. All right. So again, down at the bottom is less. Oops. Yeah, so now I'm just going to darken this part. Because I'd made my lines already so dark, these details are not going to pop as well as they might, but as they should. But so again, I tilt my triangle again. So for this, you definitely will need your two triangles, right? Because you just need to. So if your ruler is in the way, move it up so that you have a clean desk at the bottom. Yeah. And then I'm just going to finish. So here I'm just disregarding the fact that this now also should be a little bit of an angle to make a perfectly cut, thing out, but I'm just going to disregard it because it's so small. Yeah, that's it. So. Okay. Yeah. Now you can see these lines now are too dark, right, from my original setup drawing. Yeah, so that's it. So and then here it's very simple because you're just drawing these lines, right? So now I can darken that, and that is pretty much that's pretty much finished with those parts. Yes. So I'll do those, and then I'll come around, and then we should have enough time to do the top, which is not as interesting, in fact, because it doesn't give us that much information, but we should do it still. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, I'll come around and see if you need help. We said it's 5. Yeah, so it's, let's see. Hold on. It's 5, okay, but it's
2.5 to the left.
It's, how did I get this? Oh, I know what happened. Okay, I made a mistake. Oops. Yeah, that's why it looked funny. See, it's wrong. So I failed to scale it. I said 5 millimeters. And it's a little tricky because it is 5 millimeters center to center, but it's really 7.5 in the drawing, which is a little tricky to center because then you have to split 7.5. But you could just do almost like 8. Yeah. So what I did, I knew something was funny. Okay, yeah, my drawing is wrong here. So in other words, when you measure it, because it is 5, right, center to center in real life, time and a half is 7.5, but 7.5 is a little tricky to split because it is whatever it is, 3 3/4. So what you can do, what did I do? Why is it different? I'm confused. Oh, I know. Actually, I did it too far. I put 5 on each side. Yeah, that's it. So I actually pushed them away from each other too much. So my centers ended up being 10 millimeters apart instead of 7.5. So let me quickly fix that because that's gonna. So because it is tricky to split 7.5, you could just say maybe 8. Why don't you just say 8, and then we label it 5. So yeah, you see, it's easy to. So I'm just gonna do. You could try to split 7.5. You could say, okay, if it were 8, it would be 4, and then 4 and 4. But if I just move it slightly off to the side, I get 7.5. Okay. Yeah, so these are my true centers. Apologize for that. They need to be a little closer. Can I borrow the template back? Thanks. Okay, so now I'm gonna get a little bigger, a little bigger circle there. Not a whole lot, but okay. Yeah, that looks better. I mean, you know, it is tight, right? And it's small dimensions, so I don't expect it to be perfect. Like, I'm not perfect, as that showed. Okay. Okay, now it should be okay. So once again, let me see, I'll do a sketch here. Maybe for the purposes of the drawing, why don't you go ahead and just put 8 millimeters. That makes it easier. Okay, let's just say it's 8, and we're gonna call it 7, and we're gonna call it 5 in the drawing. But so it means 4 and 4 on each side. Yes, so it'll be slightly more open. Okay. This is frustrating. See? Yeah. So I made another mistake down here in that I made my spacing. Thank you for asking. So it's actually 7.5 real. Yeah. So these guys are actually 7.5, which means I need to fix them again. Yeah. Why don't I do that right away? Because otherwise you get confused between the yeah, so there were 5. This was 5 and 5, 1 and 1, which became 7.5 and 1.5, like I show here, which is actually correct. So I'll just correct that real quick. 7.5, 1.5, 7.5, 1.5. Ay, ay, ay. Maybe I'll tape it again this afternoon and see if I get it better. All right, now it looks like a little bit messy here, but original is better. So we have 25 minutes, so why don't I now move this down and I show you how to do the drawings for the top view and the section. And again, if you look up for a moment, you already have now, if you have done these two views, you already have all the information because the side is really just the side, meaning the, you know, how tall this thing is, right? How wide or how deep, whichever you want to call it. So there is no real information about here. It's just what it is, which is what did we decide it was? It's 15 millimeters, right? So the side is 15 millimeters. There is no question about that. So this one, again, we bring it up. If we use 45 degrees and this is 1 inch, this ends up being also at 1 inch. And then this is less. This may be 3/4 just because I had to fit it. So the real question is, where are all these lines? And the answer is you have all that information already here without the need to measure, meaning you would just project anything that you might see if you were looking down. And the tricky part, of course, is that some things kind of disappear completely, or they're very, very, they're seen very, very little. In other words, these notches, even though in theory you see them all because this is not vertical, right? This is at an angle. In theory, you see them all, but in practice, you see them very little because everything gets compressed. So in other words, when I project the corner, right, of my tip, which is this spot, when I project it, I get this line right here. So between this point and this point, I have the entire pin. Oops. I have the entire pin. So this line representing this, and this bit representing that, in that small space, in theory, I'm supposed to represent also these notches, but in practice, as you can see, I just did perhaps this one with maybe like a very faint double line. The rest is straightforward. You just project the middle, you project the two tips here, and you get those lines. So, and that's exactly what I did here. I just pushed up all these lines. So you would use your base straight edge, the one you move up and down, and then you use your triangle, and you just very lightly bring them all up, you know, make extensions going up there. And that's it. That's the top view. The section, on the other hand, it's a little bit different. It's the lines that you project from this part here, which is where we cut. So we decide that we cut the pin in the middle of those curves, okay? And therefore, once we knock these out and we look at it from this angle, it's a slightly different view. And we etch the part that we cut through. So whatever is cut through, we etch, and that's the true section. Whatever is beyond is actually still an orthographic because those are not cut parts. They're like real parts. So the line should be, as you can see, regular lines, and that this part represents what you can still see. Now notice I made a little double line because if in fact this was held in the same spot after I cut, there would be a little bit of a gap there, okay? It's just that after I cut it, this gets closer. It's minor, but it's there, right? You know what I mean? So this gap is there. So I'm cutting it, but I'm pretending that the spring doesn't react, and so I keep that little gap. And that's that little gap right here, okay? And you can see that at this point, in the drawing, right? Essentially I'm projecting this part. So these are the two pieces they're going to be showing as cuts. And then beyond that, it's going to be this part, which here touches because, again, the spring closing in, but otherwise it is a little gap. Okay, so when you look at that's the result, right? So we have the cross, the two cut parts, the little gap in the middle that would still be there if the spring didn't, bring it closer, and then the two sides. That's it. And then again, this is also the same width. And I didn't even put dimensions here because we have dimensions everywhere else. So the first thing to do is to just bring, do these two little blocks in the more or less there. Again, bringing these at 45. So I'll do that now. I'll just, we do need to indicate the section, which is AA. And by the way, if we don't finish today because I wanted to show you also how to put dimensions, we can finish it next week. Next week we're going to do this drawing in isometric, but we'll take the whole week to do it. So next week will just be one drawing. So again, if we don't finish this week, we can complete it next week. So I'm going to move my drawing down and finish and just locate. So from this part, I just extend everything. I might get a little confused, but because there's lots of lines. So again, see, I was. Can you look up for a moment? I was taking a reading from here, but what happens is this is a limited area. It's kind of small, so it's always best to take. Well, again, you don't have that problem because if you trust your ruler, it's always going to be straight. But I don't have that luxury, so. What I'm saying is I'm going to take my reading from a well-known, nice, straight, trustworthy line, like this one in the middle, which was my very first line. But I don't like this. I don't have enough of a grip. So I'll do this. I'll take the two triangles. Yeah, and that's it. And now I just bring all my lines from. Yeah, I'm going to disregard the very bottom little notches. I'll just do this. So anything that I see as a feature, I just project up. So now I'm doing the tips, the middle line, the other tip, and then perhaps the little notch. But again, that's a tough call. Sorry, everything blacks out here. Anyway, now I just brought all those lines up. Now I just need to bring these two lines. Mind you, I could just measure, right? Whatever that is, 15 millimeters we said. I could just measure it. But really, what happens is that this is what we do. Remember the planes that fold with the hinges, right? Crap. So this is the fancy way of doing it. Okay? In other words, I just brought I just flattened my planes, but I could have done it like this too. I could have brought these 2 points over by doing 45 degrees. They happen to give me the same result, right? And then I just connect it. Like that. And I know I see everything now from the edge to the edge. So in other words, if I look at this, I have a rectangle. The rectangle is really the base, and everything else is inside that rectangle. Right? that's how big it is. And because it tapers here, I see the two sides. So, and I'm just going to darken all these lines because these are all lines that I see. But you know what? Maybe we'll just leave the notch part kind of undefined because so that's the top view, which, by the way, at some point we should label. But let's do that at the end. So, like that. And now the section, we're going to locate it first. We're going to draw it. The way we draw a section line is by a short dash and a long dash, like that. And then I was taught to then put a little arrow, on the sides to show me which direction I'm looking at after I cut the object, okay? And then also we label it like AA, because the drawing could be like in another page, for example, of a package of drawings. And now I just arbitrarily take, a measurement to leave room here. So I think I did 3/4 of an inch, or I don't know, that's a funny measurement. Let's just say 3/4 of an inch.
So on our drawing, when we turn it in, you want us to put the dimensions on there too?
A few dimensions, yeah. Like I have lots here, but I would say, like these three. And you don't need to put the in parentheses measurement. It would just be the real dimensions, because then we say the scale is 15 millimeters really equals 10 millimeters. So that tells me that it's time and a half. Yeah, I'll.
You want the dimensions when you post it online, you want us to just do those ones?
Yeah, it should be a little cleaner. You see, mine is a little bit messy now because of all these things. So it should have. Normally, it would have just the real dimensions. In other words, in the computer too, if you draw something and then you pull the tape measure, and it draws a dimension, it displays a dimension, it will display the real dimension, not whatever. And then it's just how you output it, the scale, whether it's going on a small sheet or a large sheet. But you always show the real dimensions. Makes sense, right? You want to know what the real thing is. So let me just quickly, 15, so this will be here. So this is now my section at the top. And here I'm going to indicate the and this can be done, the little arrows here can be made like this, like little triangles. You can use your 45s to see what I'm doing. I'm just creating little triangles, triangle guys, thingies. And then I just put an A there and an A there because it's indicating what that line is. So what I need to do now is, in order to draw the section properly, I need to project, hold the points where that plane cuts, right? Basically, I need to now project these new points, right? So wherever they are. So I just pick them from here. And it's really just the corner, of course, because I can still see beyond it. And then the 4 spots where the circle part gets cut. So let's see. And that little gap we discussed, right? So have to keep track of all your lines. And if you get lost, just darken it right away, like I'm doing right now. Right now I'm picking up the, yeah, sorry about my sweat, it throws off the exposure here every time I go over, but I can't help it. So again, we have a little gap. Then we have this fella here. I have to be careful, yeah. That doesn't look right. No, I went a little too far there. Okay. And again, we're just going to cross etch the part that is cut. And that would be, yeah, I'm struggling to make them the same now, but it's the two, it's this area and this area, right? That and that. So I'll just, and 45, or it doesn't matter what angle, but 45 is pretty good. So, and you know, this is again before computers, right? Because in computers, of course, now you can just fill this in real quick. Architects used to use zipatones. These were like, made a mistake already. These were film, like adhesive films that would have patterns already pre-printed on them. And so you don't have to do this work that I'm doing now. Which, if you have to do a lot, could give you wrist problems and kind of sore hands, but. There. Okay. So that's my section. It's not very exciting looking, but that's what it is. So it's almost time. So yeah, let me just look at the drawing again. I'll put one dimension maybe, and then also show how you want to indicate the dimensions pointing to circles. So the way you do those is like this. You want to have a line that comes off the circle that you're showing, that you're indicating, that you're labeling, but that line, if you were to extend it towards the middle, it would actually hit the middle. So if you have a circle that's like this, a line that comes off like this wouldn't be good, because, you know, if I extended it, it's sort of overshooting the center. So it's always good to show, again, that little pointer pointing to the center, even though you're not drawing this, but the way it goes it goes towards the center, okay? And then perhaps it's directly labeled like that, or like this, you know, with an extra little line. And we just indicate either the radius or the diameter. I think here I show diameters. And these are now real, okay? 10 is the real diameter, 10 millimeters. So you would label it as such, 3 millimeters and 6 millimeters. And on the other ones, what you do is you draw dimension lines, dimension lines from the point that you're measuring, but you don't really need to go all the way to it. You just go like close to the object. And then you draw dimension lines, extension lines, and then dimension lines, and you put little arrows. And the arrows the shape of the arrow should be, what I say, it's like a Christmas tree, not like a, a thing like that. It's more like pointy. And it can be hollow too, it's okay. I realize there isn't that much room, so they have to be fairly small. But let me see if I were to add, there's no room here anymore because I filled it up, but just again, use your tools. Don't do anything by hand, meaning don't do approximate positions. Always use your tools. So perhaps I want to show now, I want to show what this circle is. And then maybe I draw a line here. One there. Like this. There are several ways to indicate, where the dimension lines end. Another way you might have seen it is this, with a little cross hatch like that. But this is just as fine. And in some spots, there is no room. See, there is no room here to put every single dimension. So what you do then is you put the dimensions outside. Anyway, now next to this, I'll write the real dimension. So 16 millimeter. I read it once, and then all the other numbers don't have to have millimeter, millimeter, millimeter. You can just write it in one place, and then you'll know, okay? All right, so I'm going to stop now, but yeah. We'll finish it. We'll go over it again on Tuesday, okay?